How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Infinite Sports. I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, to give you my picks for Championship Sunday. Two championship games to decide what teams will be representing their respective conferences in the Super Bowl. And listen, it's an exciting weekend. Cherish it, enjoy it, because football is coming to an end. It's coming to an end. And we get things started off with two teams that are familiar playing in this spot, in this stage, and that's the Denver Broncos and the New England Patriots. Now, we aren't going to see Bo Nix in this game because of the broken ankle, and it'll be Jared Stidham getting the start for the Broncos, going up against his former team, the Patriots. The Broncos winning that unbelievable game last week against the Buffalo Bills, knocking them off in overtime. Patriots playing the first two rounds of the playoffs with the Broncos getting the bye. Obviously, Patriots knocking off the Chargers and taking down the Texans. Defense played really well, forcing turnovers. I mean, also you could say C.J. Stroud was forcing turnovers himself with some of the throws that he made, and Patriots defense definitely could have had more. Drake May still hasn't played a great game yet, and once again now he's going up against a tough defense in the Broncos. Now, the Bills, they did have their way with that Broncos defense, moving the ball up and down the field. I mean, they just turned the ball over a bunch of times, but I feel like the Patriots could still find success in moving the football against this Broncos defense. And, look, it's going to come down to Jared Stidham having to play a clean game and not trying to do too much. And I think Sean Payton will put together a game plan that, will put him in a good situation. And we'll see what happens with J.K. Dobbins. The Broncos, I think the biggest key for them, or one of the biggest keys for them in this game, is their ability to run the football. They have to establish a ground game here, because if Jared Stidham's going to have to drop back and throw, 30 plus times, that's not going to be a good recipe to success there. Now, obviously, if the Broncos defense is holding up on their end, okay, but which, I'm not saying that the Broncos defense is going to get absolutely shredded, but I think that the Patriots can find success. The Broncos are not, I think the Patriots' toughest task so far in these playoffs was the Texans' defense. So, and based off of what we saw last week, obviously, Josh Allen, Drake May, two different quarterbacks. But I think the Patriots can find success moving the football against this Broncos defense. But yeah, for me, the Broncos got to establish a ground game. R.J. Harvey, and we'll see what happens with J.K. Dobbins if he does indeed end up playing. And I know a couple of wide receivers are a little banged up coming in. With Troy Franklin and Pat Bryant, we'll see, what happens there. They're both dealing with two different injuries. It's a tall task, for Jared Stidham. It's a tough position to be put in, having not thrown a pass, in the NFL in 2 years, excluding the preseason. So it's going to be tough. But look, the Broncos are at home. They got that home crowd on their side. I know I talked about the defense, but the defense is still good, despite what I said. It's going to be tough, but the Patriots' defense is also very good, too. And I think they're going to make life difficult on Jared Stidham. So, we'll see. It could be a defensive battle. It could be a defensive battle, despite what I said. Like I said, Drake May still hasn't played a great game yet. So, and he put the ball in harm's way last week. He could definitely do that here. I mean, he's turned it over in both playoff games. And the Broncos, they forced 5 turnovers last week. It could be another game where you see a lot of turnovers in this game, and it's all about field position. But, it's not as intriguing of a matchup as it would have been had Bo Nix been playing. And, of course, we've seen these two teams go against each other in the past, and you had Tom Brady and Peyton Manning going up against each other. With Peyton winning both times as a member of the Broncos. Brady got beat up especially the second game. I mean, that was probably, other than like the Giants Super Bowls and maybe some of the matchups against the Ravens, that AFC Championship game. That was one of those games where I've never seen Brady take as many hits as he did. He took a lot of hits in that game. Probably still feels them to this day, but it's going to be an interesting game. Like I said, it's going to be all about field position and, maybe what defenses, can force the turnovers more, which kind of favor the Patriots based off of the matchup. So I think it'll still be a close game. I want to give the Broncos that respect. That they are going to put a good enough game plan. Well, they're gonna generate some points here, but I just look at the Patriots with the difference in quarterbacks, and with how the Patriots defense has been playing. I feel like the Patriots are going to do just enough to win this game and advance to the Super Bowl. I just feel like it's going to be too much for Jared Stidham to overcome here. Again, it's a tough spot to be in. It really is. But I just like the Patriots here. I like the Patriots here to get the win and get back to the Super Bowl. But we'll see what happens. Look, could Jared Stidham be the next Nick Foles, where he steps in and he's a backup quarterback and leads this Broncos team to the promised land? Yeah, I'm sure it's possible. Although the difference is, and Nick Foles even sent a tweet out to Broncos fans about it, but Nick Foles at least started a couple of regular season games, and then, you know, then they had a bye, and they faced off against the Falcons in the divisional round, and then the Vikings after that. Like, he had starts under his belt. Jared Stidham hasn't thrown a pass in a couple of years, and now he's just being thrown into the fire under tough circumstances in the AFC Championship game. So we'll see. I mean, look, Sean Payton. We talked about this early in the week. Sean Payton spoke very highly of him, and that he's going to be ready for this. I mean, it's we'll find out on Sunday if that's the case. But and he is a veteran quarterback. Again, it's going to be too much to overcome here, in my opinion. I just think the Patriots right now, they are their defense is going to give them a hard time. Drake May's got to be better at protecting the football. But I think with the obviously Bo Nix plays, I might be taking the Broncos instead. That's really what it comes down to. It's really what it comes down to is just the Patriots having the healthier quarterback. That's who I'm going with. So I'm going with the Patriots here to get the win. And then we move on to the NFC. This is another grudge match. Seahawks and the Rams. And we went over the statistics. I mean, they have around the same points scored in both games this season. Same yards almost combined in both games this season. Now, the Rams, they should have swept the Seahawks. Seahawks kind of lucked out on some plays, particularly the 2-point conversion that Charbonnet ended up picking up. And they reviewed it, and it was a 2-point conversion. And then, obviously, the Seahawks won in overtime. And the Rams, they got the ball first, and they scored right away. Puka Nacua scores that touchdown. It was a great game. One of the games of the year. Now, the Rams, to me, have not looked like themselves. I mean, even with the win last week, I still not fully confident in this team. Although the defense got key stops, they got turnovers in key situations. So, that gives me confidence going into this game, especially when you're going up against a quarterback in Sam Darnold where they have, I think, 7 picks again? They got 7 interceptions off of Darnold this year. But the offense still, at times hasn't looked right. I mean, they locked in, in crunch time in these past 2 playoff games. But still looking for them to get back to how they were like earlier in the season. I mean, they got Devontae Adams back. Puka is a monster. They found success with running the football with Kyron Williams last week. So, they're going to have to try to do that. And it's very hard to do that against the Seattle defense. They are very good at stopping the run. So, yeah, look, I've said it all year. Since the beginning. I had the Rams winning the Super Bowl. And I'm still going to go with that. Although it's going to be very tough. It's going to be very tough going into that environment with the playoffs now. And they're going up against a tough defense. And Sam Darnold, didn't really have to do that much last week because the Seahawks controlled that game from start to finish. They dominated. Now, I don't think it's going to be the same kind of game here. I think this is going to be another close, contested game. And it could come down to who has the ball last. I think this could be a game that Darnold, turns the ball over. But could the Seahawks also get some turnovers? They absolutely could. Um, I also, the other thing too is Zach Charbonnet being out. I think that's a tough loss for the Seahawks. Now that you're going to ask more out of Kenneth Walker, who actually played really well against the Rams the last time they played against each other. Had that long touchdown run. So there's going to be more to be asked out of him. Smith and Jigba is going to do his thing. The Rams secondary, I think we've seen it. It is vulnerable. It can be had, and they could definitely exploit that in this game with Smith and Jigba. And you also got Cooper Kupp, who hasn't really had a big year, but he's in the playoffs. He can make some big catches. AJ Barner had a touchdown the last time these two teams met. He's become a real weapon for them. Um, it's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be another close game. I mean, both games. You know, Seahawks could have won the first game. Despite Darnold having 4 turnovers. I mean, it came down to a Jason Myers field goal that he ended up missing, and they ended up losing by I think a point or two. Um, Look, Darnold, like I said, didn't have to do that much last week because of how the game went. Here, he's going to have to do a lot. He's going to have to do a lot. This is going to be a game where you're going to have to put up points, and the opposition is going to match whatever you do. Because, look, I know what I said about the Rams being shaky, but they got the offensive firepower that they can match up with anybody. And Devontae Adams is still, trying to get himself back to how he was prior to his injury, and, he's been a touchdown monster this year. So, look for him to get more involved in this game. Again, Puka's going to do his thing. If the Rams can establish the run, that could really, help them in this contest. Because, like I said, Seattle just, one of those teams that, you can't really run the football against them. You can't. So, and we'll see. But and the other thing too is when it comes to the Rams, you talk about legacies with guys, like Devontae Adams was playing in I think his fifth conference championship game. He's 0-4, so he's looking to get to his first Super Bowl. Matthew Stafford, if he wins this game, he'll be playing in his second Super Bowl. Sean McVay will be coaching in his third Super Bowl potentially. And one thing with Matthew Stafford too that I wanted to touch upon briefly is there were comments made earlier this week. If he ends up winning his second Super Bowl, one person said that he could be better than Aaron Rodgers all time. No, I don't think that's the case. I disagree with that. I think Aaron Rodgers is in his own class. I think, look, Stafford has 2 rings. That definitely, boosts his odds for the Hall of Fame and, definitely moves him up a certain list. But I don't think it moves him up to the point where he's better than Aaron Rodgers. But I think this would really help Stafford in his, Hall of Fame consideration. I think he's already there pretty much. But a second Super Bowl would really cement that. And, he's one of those quarterbacks that's part of that last generation that I always like to bring up because to me that was the golden age. And, it'll be interesting because I was having a conversation the other day with one of my coworkers, if he could retire, if the Rams potentially win the Super Bowl. Obviously, they got to get past this week. It is going to be interesting. I mean, I still think Stafford could play. I think we all think Stafford could still play at a high level for another couple of years. But you win that second Super Bowl as a guy that's been injured a lot. Maybe you ride off into the sunset on a high note. So we'll see about that. But they are going to have their hands full with the Seahawks. I mean, look again, everybody. I didn't have this team making the playoffs. I didn't because it came down to Sam Darnold again. They traded away DK. No more Tyler Lockett. Smith and Jigba now is the lead guy, and new system now. Like, how is Darnold going to be? And Darnold's been great. Darnold's been great. And credit to him. I mean, it's been a long journey from him. Going from the Jets to the Panthers, and then the Vikings. Well, before that there was the 49ers. Forget about that. backing up Purdy and then knocking off Purdy last week. Then you end up on the Vikings and you step in as the full-time starter. You have a great year, but then the Rams. That's the team you went up against last year in the playoffs, and they sacked you 9 times. And now you knock them off the second game, the second matchup of the season against them. You end up winning the division. You got the 1 seed, and now you're facing off against them again for a trip to the Super Bowl. And it really is going to be up to him because the Seahawks are going to make their plays. And look, the Rams, they moved the ball well against them the last time. Stafford almost put up 500 yards passing. But you know what? The Seahawks defense, they will make plays in this game. It's going to be up to Sam Darnold having to come out and make plays and not make mistakes. That is what it's going to come down to. And you got Kenneth Walker back there. Again, not having Charbonnet is unfortunate, but they'll find success running the football. They've been able to do that. Like I said, the Rams secondary to me is vulnerable. And the Rams, they got to do a better job at getting to the quarterback. Because they don't do that. Their secondary, you've seen it in these first 2 playoff games. They've kind of been picked apart a little bit. And then obviously, Caleb Williams last week threw that, that prayer up. I mean, and I don't know what the defensive back on the Rams was doing. Horrible route to the ball, and Cole Kmet comes down with it. So, look, Rams, they gotta get pressure. Got to get pressure on Darnold. We'll see, but I am gonna take the Rams in this game. It should be another great game. Again, it could come down to who has the ball last, but I'm gonna take the Rams to get this win and get to the Super Bowl, and then it'll be a rematch of the Rams-Patriots Super Bowl that we saw back in the 2018-2019 season when the Patriots won 13-3. And that was Sean McVay's first Super Bowl appearance. So those are my picks. Patriots versus Rams. Let me know what you guys think. Who wins these 2 games on Sunday? I'm excited for it. But I'm also not excited because football, again, is nearing the end. And then we got to wait. But, we'll have free agency and the draft to talk about when that happens. Don't expect any Pro Bowl videos coming from me because I'm not saying you would have expected that. Not going to cover the Pro Bowl. But, 3 games left. But let me know what you guys think about the games, who you're picking. Let me know in the comments. And as always, everybody, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the video, to the channel. Make sure to follow us on the social media platforms in the description below. And wherever you get your podcasts, you can always listen to us as well. Just look up Infinite Sports, and you'll find us there. And also, make sure to check out my Yankee video that I have out. The Yankees signing Bellinger. They re-signed Cody Bellinger. I'll also talk about the Mets making some moves, acquiring Luis Robert from the White Sox, and also the Mets acquiring Freddie Peralta as well for the rotation, which was a good move. So we'll talk about that. Actually, also, I know we're wrapping up here, but quick thing, the Pittsburgh Steelers did hire Mike McCarthy. So he will be their next head coach, replacing Mike Tomlin. What does that mean for Aaron Rodgers? Will he come back? We'll see. Do I like the hire? Look, Mike McCarthy wins games. But for me, I don't know. I feel like the Steelers maybe could have went in a different direction. But I'll talk about that more next week. So, as always, everybody, I'm your host, Kenneth Gruenfelder, signing off. Have a good one, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Take care.